everyone, my name is Tara Chandra. I'm a fashion, beauty, lifestyle, hair content creator. I'm doing my first book video, I think. I recently got into reading maybe around a year ago, and before that I never really read a lot. I definitely had phases growing up. I hated reading as a kid, but then I hit a point where I was suddenly like, wait, book is fun. I like reading book good. And I clearly remember in year 8 I read To Kill a Mockingbird as one of my school texts, and I just kind of got back into reading. And then over the years, like in uni and everything, I kind of just fell out of reading again. Now I am back in it, and I think I'm here for a while and for a good time. So I thought I would make a video on how to get back into reading, or how to get into reading if you've never really been into reading in the first place. I personally have had my ups and downs with reading, so I know what it's like to be in a reading rut where nothing is good. Like, reading is just like not on the top of my priority to-do list. I have been reading consistently since the end of 2022. I was like, what year is it? I know that Book Talk and BookTube are popping off, and that's really inspiring people to get back into reading or to buy lots of books. But as we all say, buying books and reading books are completely different hobbies. I've written down a few steps about how to get back into reading, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. First step, inspire yourself to get back into reading. The fact that you're watching this video right now, great first step. Watching book videos and like talking to friends who read a lot are great starting points. And what I like to do when I'm watching these videos and talking to my friends is to write a list or add it to my Goodreads to be read. All the books that they talk about that I know that I will be interested in or potentially will be interested in. I use Goodreads. I know there's a bunch of different websites and apps that you can use to track books. I personally don't really read books if they have an under 3.8 star out of 5 rating. That's just my preference. I've found in the past when I've read books under that rating, I typically found them really average, or I didn't like them at all. That's just what I go by, but you guys can experiment with that. Next step, set a goal. I am very streaks, goal, number driven, so I don't have a nearly 1,000 Duolingo streak for a reason. I personally find it so useful to set a number when I want to reach a goal. So for example, my goal for this year is to read 50 books. Last year my goal was 25, but then I just kept reading more and more, and I ended up reading 55 books because I kind of just wanted to push myself to reach the next number that was like a multiplier of 5, or division. Wait, what's the word for it? You can divide it by 5. So like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. You get the idea. But yeah, I am very streak driven, and I'm also really realistic in the goal that I want to set for myself. So for example, if you have read one book in the past year, maybe set your goal to 5 books and think about how often you actually can be reading. Reading takes up a lot of time. It is a form of entertainment, but you can also read when you're in your commute to work or when you commute to school, wherever you're going. I like to bring a book on the train with me when I'm heading into the city. If you're going to be reading before bed, how much time you'll have to actually be reading, and then figure out your goal based on that and maybe pump it up a few numbers. You want your goal to be realistic, but you also want to push yourself a bit. My third point is something that applies to everyone, whether you're into reading or you're getting back into it. Go to the library. I am such a library stan. I know that I have the privilege of living in a city where libraries have really great selections of books. I know that other countries and cities don't necessarily have that, but if you live in Australia or somewhere that has a good library system, go to the library. It is free to borrow books. I believe authors receive a commission or a certain amount of money every time you do borrow a book from the library, so you are still supporting them that way. I could be wrong, that might be different in different countries, but I'm pretty sure that's what is a thing. But yeah, go to the library or borrow books from friends, because it doesn't put the pressure on you to finish a book if it is shit. I'm being honest, there's been so many books that I have wanted to read, and then I've opened the first page and I'm like, I know I'm not gonna like this. And it is okay to judge a book by its cover. I always judge a book by its cover. If the cover is pretty, I will be drawn to it. There's maybe been like one book I've read where I thought I wouldn't like it based on the cover, but I really enjoyed it. Every other book I've been like, yeah, no, this cover was not made for me, and therefore this book wasn't. And that is okay, because there is always a market for that book. It just might not be you or me. Wait, is this recording? I always get... Okay, it is. Whenever I film things, I always get stressed that it hasn't been recording, and I've like been yapping my ass off for like 20 minutes. At my local library, the librarians put out like popular books at the front, and then also their librarian picks, and I usually like go through those first. I type them into Goodreads, I look at the ratings, the reviews, blah blah blah, and yeah, I can like pick out books that I otherwise wouldn't have known about from those, which is so great. I usually have a list, and I like will type it into the computer to see if they have it in the library system. But I also reserve books, which is such a great option to have. I'm such a library stan, like there's nothing bad about the library at all. I can't think of one con of the library. I mean, they're obviously not going to have every single book that you will ever want to read, but the library is just so good. Sometimes books are so expensive, it adds up. Like in Australia, books can be like $20 to $30 per book, and girl, if I'm reading 50 books in a year, I'm not trying to spend $1,000 on books. I love having physical books. I love reading physical books. I also love reading ebooks. But yeah, the library is just great because, as I said, if you don't like the book from the get-go, you don't have to read it and you don't feel bad about buying a whole book. Because I know that when I buy a book, I feel pressured to read it all, even if I'm not enjoying it, and it's just a waste of time. If you know you're not going to like it, don't read it. Okay, my next point is so important. You need to find a really good first, second, and third book to read. Know your genre and what genres you like. Personally, I am not drawn to romance, fantasy, or historical books, but I have read books in that genre and I have enjoyed it. It's just been a bit harder for me to find something that I do enjoy within that. So for example, the last book I read was, oh, it's actually right here. It's my sister's book. My friend recommended this. It's All the Light We Cannot See. They actually made a show of this, I believe, or a movie. I don't know. I haven't read it. I mean, I haven't watched it, but I read this, and this is based in World War II. I would never have thought I would read a book based in World War II, but I realized that I don't mind historical fiction if it's written in a modern way and there's not all that old English or whatever. You know, it doesn't really reference historical moments, but it's just based in that setting. That's chill with me. I wouldn't have otherwise known that because I don't really want to be reading about the war. Understand your genre. When you're listening to people talk about books or when you're reading the blurb of the books, kind of get an idea of whether you'd be into it. I also like to read the first page of a book sometimes if I'm in the library, or sometimes you can see the first page of a preview online if you're purchasing a book, or if you're at a bookstore, obviously. You can read the first page and see whether you like the writing style and then also whether you think you'd like it. If you've never really been into reading, it is quite difficult to know what genre you do like. Base it off your interests. Do you like dragons and fairies? No, then maybe fantasy isn't for you. If you're into rom-com movies, maybe you'd be into a romance novel. As your first book, you also want to pick like an easy book to read. You don't want it to be like 800 pages long. You also want it to be a book that flows quite quickly. Obviously take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, because if you like hard to read books and you like long books, then go for it. But I think as a first book to get back into reading, you want something to motivate you to be like, oh, reading isn't that hard. Reading isn't that time consuming. I've just read a book in 2 days because it was only 100, 200 pages long, you know. If you have any friends that are into reading, you could also ask them for recommendations of what they think you will like. My sister loves reading, so when I was getting back into reading, she recommended me books that she thought I would like, and I like them. She has a pretty good gauge about what I enjoy. That was really useful for me. I know not everyone has friends that do read. Only a handful of my friends read regularly. Really great option if you do have that there. Something that I don't do, but I think works for a lot of people, is to join a book club. I think book clubs are a great way to keep in check and keep to a time limit when reading a book. I think a lot of book clubs have a book once a month, and that's kind of forcing you to read within a month and get you to finish it and then also analyze the book. Make sure you're not skimming over all the details because you're going to discuss it. I personally love to read a book and then completely forget about what happened in it. Do not ask me about what happened in any of my favorite books because I have no idea. I just remember the feeling I got. I'm the same when I watch movies or consume any form of media. Like, I literally do not remember what I have consumed. If you like talking about movies or shows, books, then join a book club, because I feel like that's such a great way to, like, one, socialize and then also talk about something that you have just read collectively. And it sounds fun. I wish I could do that, but empty. It's empty out there. My following points are kind of tips but also steps in a way, I guess. The next one is to swap other entertainment with reading. In the time that you'd be scrolling on social media on your phone, read instead. If you like to go on TikTok while you're eating, read while you're eating instead. If you're a big TV movie person, swap like half of the time you spend watching a show and read instead. For me, I found that forcing myself to read in the times that I'd be otherwise scrolling on social media, especially like TikTok, where I would literally doom scroll for like an hour straight and then I'd come up with the pop-up like, stop scrolling. That guy that pops out of the door, I get that all the time because I scroll on TikTok for an hour straight and I don't exit the app. I found that when I make the conscious decision to not scroll on social media or not watch a movie and read instead, I always feel so much better about myself. Who would have guessed? Another tip I actually got from like my year 7 English teacher maybe. I just remember sitting in class and my English teacher saying this. She said that if she doesn't enjoy a book by 100 pages in, then it's over. She stops reading it. And I have stuck by that rule because it is so accurate. I find a lot of books get good around 80 to 100 pages in, and if I am not enjoying it by then I'm not going to enjoy it at all, most likely. There have been times where, for example, I tried to read a romance book, Book Lovers, which was one of the top romance books of like last year, I think. I think I read 50 pages and I hated every single page of it. I was like, this is so cliched. I know exactly what's going to happen next. It happened. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't do it. And then in the book, she was talking about how like blah, blah, blah is so cliched. And I'm like, bro, literally your writing right now is so cliched. It actually pains me to think about that book. I'm sorry if you like that book. I know a lot of people love that book, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I stopped, and I'm so glad that I stopped. And I will always use that as an example of why you should stop reading a book if you don't think you'll enjoy it. Anyways, sorry, I got really passionate about me not liking that book. Each their own. Okay, back to my point. Obviously, if it is a short book, like 150 pages, I'm not going to stick by that rule. If I'm not enjoying it by like 25 pages in, then it's probably not a good book. Or I'm like, oh, it's only 150 pages, I guess I'll read it all. Because that's kind of what I'm doing right now, because I just finished that chunky book. This was like how many pages? 500 pages. The text is quite like sparse on each page, so this is realistically probably like a 350 page book. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna read a really short book right now, and I'm reading the randomest book. I don't even want to show you guys because it's not good. It's so weird. I'm like, why is she falling in love with her cousin? But it's like a penguin classic. It all ties back because my last point is, if I read a chunky book, I like to read a thin book after. It's like a little win after the big win, and then it feels like you had a double win. Also, even though it's a short book, it feels like you've read two normal size books because one was really chunky and one was really small. So together they're like the size of two normal size books. And I think that's fair, especially when you're doing like a little street goal thing with me, because I could read like 50 really short books, but that wouldn't be fun, right? I like to even it out a bit for myself and then also give myself the wins. I'm like, wow, that's so satisfying. I read 2 books in X amount of time. I really just yapped for so long and I really stumbled over my words. I haven't done a sit down YouTube video in the longest time, but this was honestly really fun. I thought I would just pop in a few recommendations of some of my favorite books. Will I be giving an in-depth description about what they're about? Absolutely not, because as I said, I have an empty brain and I do not remember books at all. A lot of these I read last year, but I have like some of the physical copies, but some of them I've borrowed from the library or like borrowed from friends and stuff, so we're not going to do that. But you know what? My absolute favorite book here, Honeybee. This one, let me talk about for a bit. This is one of my favorite books ever. I think it is my favorite book ever. I will always recommend this book. It's by Craig Silvey, who also wrote Jasper Jones. I swear I had it. Oh, here it is. This was a great book at the time. I don't really remember what it was about, but Honeybee, it is so good. I'm gonna put like the little blurb on the screen. I'm a very slow reader, and also don't be put off if you're a slow reader, because I'm a very slow reader. My sister's an incredibly fast reader. She can read 5 books in 2 days. Like, I don't know how she does it. I read this in 1 day and I was so proud of myself, but it was also just a testament to how amazing this book is. I will recommend it to the day I die. But yeah, I actually want to reread this. That is a great book to have as your first book to read. To get back into reading, I will highly recommend that book. Girl, Woman, Other is incredible by Bernardine Evaristo. This was one of the books that also got me back into reading. I would say it's quite a difficult writing style to initially get into. It's kind of like a little bit annoying because there isn't any punctuation. I really enjoyed Kaikei. This is a book that I read at the end of last year, I believe. It was just so fun to read. I believe it was based on like traditional South Asian stories, and they kind of took one story about Kaikei and turned that into a whole novel. I also really love memoirs. I don't know if I would recommend this per se. It's Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Oh my god, I'm gonna cry. Like, my sister and I were literally crying about this book last night because it is such a heartbreaking book. So Chanel Miller is Emily Doe in the Brock Turner case. She went by Emily Doe because no one actually knew who she was for the whole case, and she's come out with this memoir, and god, it is like heart-wrenching. Like, everything she went through the whole process was just so sad, and I feel like justice was not served there. Oh my god, I feel so emotional like just trying to talk about it. Don't know if I would recommend that. Maybe you would enjoy that as like your first book getting back into reading, but I personally don't know if I could read that as my first book getting back into reading because it is so emotional and it is a true story. But yeah, there's that. I really enjoyed The Shadow of the Wind, which is the book that I was talking about earlier, where I didn't think I would like the book based on its cover. One of the guys at Samsung, I'm a Samsung creator by the way, he recommended me this book and it is so good. I really enjoyed this one. Lessons in Chemistry, that's a really popular book that won a bunch of awards last year I think, or the year before that. I personally really enjoyed it. I know for some people it wasn't that interesting. I thought it was really engaging and really great and a fun read. I read so many good books last year. This year has been so grim for the books I've read. I've read like one good book. It's interesting though because I feel like a lot of the books that I rated as 5 stars back when I first started reading may not be a 5-star to me now, just because I've read more and I've gotten a better gauge for what is interesting and how to rate books. I feel like I'm just gonna leave it at that. I think those were like my top favorite books. Just kidding, in the time that I filmed this video and now that I'm editing it, I have one more book to recommend because this was incredible. It's by the author of Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens. She won a bunch of awards for that book, which I honestly thought was just good. But this book, Safe Haven, oh my god, it just came out about 2 months ago and it is amazing. It really touches on the asylum seeker refugee detention centers we have in Australia. It was inspired by the Below Love family. Yeah, this was incredible. Yeah, I would highly recommend this book. It was a perfect mix of bringing in actual social political issues and mixing that with fiction. It had a really fun mystery element to it, which I really enjoyed. It was super easy to read. I feel like it does appeal to more of an Australian audience, but if you are not from Australia, I think you would still enjoy this as well. I think it just makes more sense as an Australian reading it and being like, oh, this is like the actual political climate that we live in the way that our politicians are responding to refugees and asylum seekers. But yeah, highly recommend this one. I hope this was really helpful for you guys who want to get back into reading or get into reading in the first place. I normally don't do book content, but I've been really enjoying other creators do book content and I love watching those videos. I know a lot of people who have fallen out of reading and have wanted to get back into it recently, so I thought this would be a good video to film because I'm sure a lot of people are in that position as well. I am normally a fashion, lifestyle, beauty and hair content creator on Instagram and TikTok. You guys can check me out here. Feel free to subscribe below. I'm hoping to post more videos. This is my second video in 2 weeks, which is really exciting. I think I'm just getting back into the groove of it. Let me know if you have any video suggestions of things you want to see from me. I hope you all have a wonderful, beautiful day and hopefully see you guys soon or on my other platforms. Bye!